Member for Abbotsford West. Member for Abbotsford West. Members. House Leader.
I'll maybe leave it for others to try and reconcile that answer with the government's decision to send patients to Washington State for cancer treatment, where an entirely different set of rules exist, Mr. Speaker.
Members, opposition member, he's your own member asking a question. Members.
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, fired healthcare workers aren't the only people feeling stigmatized by this government. 3.5 years ago, I wrote to the then Attorney General, now Premier. I wrote to explain how I was being contacted by faith-based groups across British Columbia who were confused and frustrated that at a time when public health orders were being changed to allow people to attend things like Pilates and yoga classes, that absolutely no accommodation was being made for people who wanted to safely gather and exercise their constitutional right to worship. Last week, I learned that far from working to put those difficult days behind us, the government is actually doubling down on prosecuting churches that tried their best to find a balance between keeping people safe and meeting their spiritual needs. My question to the Premier is this: how is it in the public interest to continue spending huge amounts of public money to prosecute, to persecute churches and churchgoers whose only sin was to try and administer to the spiritual needs of their communities?
Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll take that question on notice. And of course, I can't talk about things that are before the court right now.
Member supplemental.
Thanks, Honourable Chair. Mindful of the fact it was about 30 years ago that I asked my first question in this chamber of then Premier Harcourt. I was hoping to entice this Premier into a final exchange with me in this forum. We use the word reconciliation a lot around this place, and for good reason. Isn't it time that the government tried to reconcile with the law-abiding and, yes, by definition, God-fearing folks who drew on their faith during a very difficult time and couldn't understand why they could go to a Pilates class but couldn't go to church? Those proceedings have now been going on for 3 years, over 3 years. And the government, I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, has spent a fortune on multiple applications, sometimes appearing in court with 5 lawyers. Next month, there will be a hearing to determine whether all of this constitutes an abuse of process by the government. These proceedings are costing the churches a small fortune, and it's costing the government money and resources that should be focused on prolific offenders who are being arrested and then turned loose to re-offend. Mr. Speaker, my question again to the Premier: how does he justify the huge expense involved in targeting these peaceful, law-abiding churches and churchgoers while dangerous, prolific offenders are released to repeatedly re-offend?
Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was the same question in effect as before, and I already took that question on notice.